산책 나가자던 뜨거운 맹세 동지는 간 데 없고 깃발만 나부겨 새날이 올 때까지 흔들리지 말자 세월은 흘러가도 산초는 안다 깨어나서 외치는 뜨거운 함성 앞서서 나가니 산자야 따르라 앞서서 나가니 산자야 따르라 세월은 흘러가도 산초는 안다 깨어나서 외치는 뜨거운 함성 앞서서 나가니 산자야 따르라 앞서서 나가니 산자야 따르라 앞서서 나가니 산자야 따르라 앞서서 나가니 산자야 따르라
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Sorry, you disappeared.
Like, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just have to wait for a couple of few minutes or so, or 5 minutes, because we haven't got everyone yet right now.
Yeah, I saw there is a list of people.
Yeah.
Okay. So which countries are represented?
I am not sure, but I think it's all over the world. Yeah, so that's all I could say of. Yeah, so I'm the speaker, and actually I'm doing a two-part. I'm doing a host and a speaker at the same time. So Sephora, she cannot be here today because she go to school. So I'm going to be taking the in charge of trying to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So
All right.
how have you been
I'm
doing?
sure it will. I'm good. My name is Saida, but we've talked through the email with Sephora.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm doing good. I'm currently in Moscow, in Russia.
Oh, you're from Russia. How's everything going over there right now?
Well, I'm Belarusian by the citizenship, but I live here for 8 years already.
Okay.
So sort of Belarus is another country in our region which faces a lot of difficulties with democracy, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, in Russia it's interesting. It's interesting period, you know, apart from the coronavirus situation.
Mm-hmm.
Just before it started, we've been going through the discussion of constitutional change, which
Yeah.
was which is a big thing, and it was sort of like pulled over for a while, and now I think it's going to be done digitally. The voting would be online, which makes it super dangerous for I mean, it's probably going to be falsed by like 2 times or 3 times easier than it was before. And
Right.
and I mean, like, it just everything just plays really good on the side of the government at the moment, because the way they pull this question of constitutional change is very like interesting. No one wants him to be in charge anymore. But the point is that the way they put in media why you need to vote for the constitutional change is that if you are, for example, a protector of of animal rights, if you are for ecological defense, if you are for the environmental issues, if all the good things, they sort of place that in front page, and in this sense, you kind of you're not really against those things, so you kind of feel like you have to say yes. But no one tells about the changes which actually kind of bring the political side of this constitutional change, which is unlimited time of being president, basically bringing back the monarchy. So
we'll be talking about a lot of those stuff in my the Gwangju Democratization Movement and how it actually relates to peace, and also the current situation, what's going on, because a lot of those things are what you said are kind of related to what's going on right now. As you said, from Russia, I actually included all of the countries that are kind of felt the similar presence of democracy movement that they experience in their own country. I'll let everyone to share on their own experiences, their own country, which we'll be discussing. So I appreciate it for your sharing a little bit for your about Russia and everything. I'm hoping that I'm expecting maybe I'm not sure how many people. It should be 6 people, but I'm not sure if I should wait for a bit. Maybe I should wait for maybe 2 minutes or so, and we're just gonna begin. We're gonna just begin. I know it says about at least an hour for the time duration, but I might gonna extend a little, like more than that. And so, if you want, obviously you could share more about yourself and everything. And so we'll be talking about a lot of it today. So I'm just gonna be waiting for at least 2 minutes, and we're just gonna move on.
No worries.
Yes.
All these online meetups sometimes get very complicated.
Yeah. I think some people are having an issue with the audio, and that's why I'm giving some time on it. But if they don't come in, we're just gonna start it, and they could just come on in. No problem. If at least 3 people, I mean, what's the point? What's the problem here? We're just gonna, do 3 people. I mean, anybody could join us at, later time if they want to. So we're not gonna be going anywhere. So.
So Hannah joined.
Hannah, do you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Hey.
I'm just waiting since my video is going to start working. Doesn't seem to be. Anyway, I will profit from my good audio connection to say hello to you. I'm happy to be with you today. How are you both doing in those strange times?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Hannah, I start.
Hello?
Hey, I can hear you.
Perfect. And you, James?
Yeah, that's me. I actually just got a break on technological issue again. Hello, Hannah. How are you today?
I'm doing well. And how are you?
I'm doing fine. So I was waiting for a couple more people to join in, but I'm just gonna get a head start right now, and they could just join whatever time they have. So I'm James. I'm just going to start here. I'm James. I'm actually a global ambassador of Institute of Economics and Peace, which is an organization that trying to analyze the any authoritarian regime that is going on over there and trying to risk the political risk of assessments and trying to figure out what can we do better to actually trying to have any political reforms going on in there. So that's a little bit about myself. Now, a couple of housekeeping. So if you obviously want to speak during at any time after I was finishing the presentation, you could I think one of the reaction or somewhere, I think you could raise your hand or something, but I don't see that here. You could actually either raise your hand, by doing this, or you could just speak in the chat or anywhere. Just let me know, so that way I could just head over to you, and you could speak from there. Now, I did say to Sadia about regarding to time duration. It says 1 hour, but I could extend that a little bit to actually trying to give us more time to tell us about our experiences to democracy movement in their home countries in any of that that they want to share of. So I'm going to extend that for a little bit. And so other than that, also I'll be sharing some of the videos regarding to the May 18th democratization movement from Gwangju. And so that's the focus of the presentation was about to be today. I'm going to be doing a share screen on it. And so let me share screen from here. Can you guys see the share screen, screen sharing? Okay, so let me begin. So as of today, we're going to be talking about Gwangju Democratization Movement commemoration. They just recently held it on May 18th, which is 40th anniversary. So it's been nearly 40 years since the day of Gwangju. They hold their democracy movement at the time on May 18th in 1980. I'm already told you about my intro. So a little bit of background, what was going on at the time prior to May 18th, 1980. Before this, South Korea actually had to undergo through a serious struggle of democratization and economic upheaval at the time. You know, after the World War II was going on, and then Japanese colonialism has been officially ended, the U.S. and Soviets were starting their military administrations trying to figure out the political roadmap, how to restart the country and everything that was going on. And so after they officially left the area within the Korean Peninsula and let the Koreans take over their own country presence at the time from the 50s through all the way to 80s, really during this time it was a turbulence period. A lot of structural changes within political democracy, and there has been a lot of economic resurgence was trying to improve the economic conditions at the time. Korea at the time was one of the poorest countries at the time during the 50s or all the way to the 80s. It was like right next to Africa, nearly 231st. It was right dead last. So there has been a lot of economic changes that was going on. It was the most difficult time for a lot of Koreans. And during the time when Park Geun-hye came in, he was the president at the time, bringing a lot of economic structural changes like Reconstruction period, for example. He implemented economic development, institute policies, and all throughout his presidency. He's been serving for over 20 years, and that was going on at the time. And so in exchange for that economic incentives for the Korean people, there has been a lot of serious offensive in incarcerating against political dissidents, student unions, labor unions, anti-government demonstration. A lot of torturing was going on. There are also such things as political prison camps, which is still currently exist in North Korea as well. So I wouldn't say North Korea is the only country out there. South Korea also had its own political prison camps, and there also have been a lot of other offenses that government has been held responsible prior to this Gwangju massacre that was going on. And during this time, there has been a lot of heavily censored on the press and media, and also they institutionalized the state textbook, which only favored the conservative policies, including favoring up any conservative president like Park Geun-hye or the former President Park Geun-hye at the time when was going on during the military rule. And so those two events, like the Jeju uprising, April 3rd incident that was going on prior to the war, and then you see the Gwangju Democratization Movement, which happened on May 18, 1980, under the Chun Ju-won's regime, military authoritarian government. So during this time, they prohibited people from discussing any anti-government movement or any other past atrocities, even including the democratization movement. So why obviously is it deemed this as a highly controversial during this time? Well, they don't want to obviously acknowledge any of the wrongdoings. They want to just cover it up. They just want to censorize any past wrongdoings, including the main democratization movement. And any of the past atrocities that they obviously trying to gain a political advantage and uphold their political image, trying to look good on themselves, like political self-image. And obviously, if they do, then if the conservatives acknowledge their wrongdoings, then unfortunately they condemn themselves as weak and selfish and irresponsible for the vote for the Liberal Party from the voters. And also they have been institutionalized the state textbooks, which they also covered on May 18 from the conservative side. So all the conservative textbooks now mentioning anything about past democracy, they cover it up, censored it, and because they don't want to mention anything to the younger generation of this past atrocity that was going on. And also any literature, any books or any other writings that mentions about past government wrongdoings or past democracy, you could get into jail, you could get detention, you also get into torture. There has been a lot of cases that has been going on from the 70s to the 80s, and including current present day, not the current administration of Moon Jae-in, the liberal government, but past conservative government within the past decade, within 10 years ago, right now. And so, and obviously some also went to political prison camps at the time when Chun Doo-hwan's government regime tried to censor and also tried to send people to basically incarcerate people for basically speaking out against the government authority. And they obviously did a mass incarceration without the court warrant, without the search warrant. They basically did not have those type of things, which is unpleasant. Literally in Western countries, you do need to have a court warrant or a search warrant before you could get detained. But during this time, they just exempt that, and basically they just send them a lot of mass incarceration for any dissidents, any opposition, or any type of anti-government state activities that was going on. So that's the whole overview of what led to this May 18th democratization movement. Now, I'll be talking about the causes of the May 18th democratization movement. Why is this happened in the first place? Mostly it's because of factionalism, regionalism have been incorporated on this because of political discontent between the Chola and Gyeongsang province. So if you look at the location of the map in Korea, like think this way, the Chola and Gyeongsang were actually from this, it's in the southwestern region, and that's from the Chola region. The Gyeongsang is actually located in the southeastern region. Both are actually located close to each other. They obviously are considered political rivals. They are. Chun Doo-hwan, you see Rotae-woo and Park Geun-hye and Park Geun-hye, all of these presidents are coming from that region. And because they have a history of economic development only favoring that region at the time, not to the Jeolla province, and they hated each other. I mean, that was the focal point why there were a lot of political discontent with each other. And they were the ones, the Jeolla region were the ones who obviously brought this democratization movement throughout the entire nation at the time prior to this May 18th. And they were protesting against President Park's Yushin constitution and his authoritarian regime for over 20 years. Bit about the Yushin constitution, all it tells this constitution is basically suppressing the fundamental human rights on all bases of constitution, guaranteed by the people. And so anything you could think of, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of rights, freedom of association, freedom of thought and learning, even also freedom to think about what you think about it. And basically all of this has been under suppression under the Park Geun-hye's regime, this Yushin constitution years. And so basically all of this led to a disapproval of Park Geun-hye's Yushin constitution military regime at the time. Again, as I said, during this time, there has been a revamp of serious economic reforms, and that contributed to currently what South Korea enjoys as an economic miracle of the Han River as of today. And so that's why, South Korea is now becoming one of the world's economic powerhouse because of President Park's achievements of his economic development. There has been some controversy on his policy, of course. I mean, he did a lot of economic development, but at the same time, he abused the human rights. So the question here, a lot of people, even experts, are saying is that, was he obviously trying to do this on purpose, or was he trying to say to the people saying, hey, obviously, if you got economic, incentives on you, obviously, then why, obviously, do I have the ability to your human rights at the same time. But they use this to say, obviously you have economic incentives, but in exchange, you need to give up your rights and on your human rights and basically freedom of speech and freedom of press in exchange for economic incentives. So in the name of national security. And so that's the pre-existing connection that was going on. And this actually, after President Park Chung-hee's assassination, which actually potentially have led to political instability throughout after his assassination, which led to the leadership vacuum at the time. So that eventually led to the collapse of the Republic of Tyranny. So after President Park Chung-hee got assassinated, this led to the leadership vacuum, and this was the total chaos. His death literally was an opportunity to just say that we gained opportunities for the Korean people. It's an opportunity for them to say, this is an opportunity for us to probably gain political freedom, basically. We have the right to gain political freedom. We also have the right to create our own, establish, trying to amend the Constitution by telling to the government, saying that this is an opportunity for government to change the Constitution, because what happened in the Yushin Constitution that literally violated all the aspects of human rights, as I mentioned, freedom of speech, all of those. And so that left a lot of leadership vacuum, and this was like another year of basically uncertainty. And so that his assassination later was a turning point of his political events that was going on. Well, obviously, we're going to skip some of these for years. Okay, so I kind of skip around a little bit, but these are the events that eventually led to the May 18th democratization movement. You obviously have this case where there's a YH training company instead of 1979. This is basically a group of women who obviously was working on the YH training company, and basically they just had a sit-in protest, and basically they just trying to demand the political freedoms of trying to gain their access of freedom of rights, freedom of press, all of those things that was going on. And so that was the incident. I was trying to break into that Democratic office, trying to demand the Democratic Party to institute institutional changes and reforms of political freedoms. And then you have this led to the contribution to Masan and Busan protests of 1979, which is a series of protests. They're demanding political freedom, social freedom, and that was going on. So that was what that Masan and Busan protests of 1979. And then eventually we have assassination of Park Chung-hee, which we'll talk about in detail. And then you obviously have this event called the coup d'etat, December 12, 1979, which basically is a military takeover of the government in the central area of Seoul area. And then you also have the beginning of this whole spring of 1980. And then you also have another coup d'etat on March 17. This was one day prior to the May 18 democratization movement because of political discontent of what the Chinese regime was going on at the time. So as I said, 200 female employees of the YH training incidents is basically rushed under the Fourth Democratic Party building against the perpetrators' decision to close the business. Basically, they're trying to do a political freedom and all of those, and that consists of 170 workers of YH Trading Company and the New Democratic Party. And then eventually this led to a series of movement and demonstration from Daegu and Seoul and all other religious organizations that were participated. And because of this, Kim Young-sam, who was the leader of Democratic, actually got expelled from the National Assembly because his involvement, which obviously that's not true, but there were other opposition party also got expelled because of the involvement of YH Trading Company incident that was going on. And as I said, the Busan Masan demonstration in 1979, this is basically a group of young students who are trying to go out in the streets and basically demanding political freedom, social freedom, shouting, do away with the Yushin system and down with the dictatorship. They were hugely disapproval of military regime and all of the dictatorship that was going on. Is basically it's been going throughout last maybe 10 days or so, and so that's basically a street protest that's been going on, demanding to bring down the dictatorship. And basically, and then this is a day of the assassination of Park Chung-hee, which we talked about. Basically, it happened October 26, 1979 at the KCIA. That stands for Korean Central Intelligence Agency, which is an intelligence agency at the time inside the Blue House of Cheongwon, which near the presidential compound in Kunjongdong, Seoul, South Korea. Literally, the KCIA at the time was right behind the Blue House, and basically they're in the same compound at the time. Right now, it's in a separate combat facility, basically in a remote area. Perpetrator at the time was Kim Jae-gyu, which he was the director. And basically, main motive, it seems like it was basically strongly disapproval of Park Chung-hee's authoritarian using constitution. And then this resulted in nearly 6 deaths, including the president, the chief bodyguard, and the brave presidential bodyguards inside the safe house at the presidential, including the presidential chauffeur, his driver, and officially occurred around 7:40 p.m. at the dinner party in a secret safe location area. And obviously, of course, this incident was a result of a conflict with the ruling party, which obviously reflected the close politics, beginning with the closure of the Yuxing system and then basically disapproval of the Yuxing regime. And obviously, with his death, this resulted in a collapse, and then it was not direct and increasing resistance of the people that canceled the Park's authority. Basically, what this means is obviously this was not direct result of the people's demand. It was basically just an encounter starting to collapse because of this assassination. Some people may think obviously it's kind of related to what the people's demand that led to the result of his death, but historians obviously denies that, and basically this is not a direct result of that. And obviously, even though he was the absolute power after his death, basically you had this like maybe I don't know how many people, but this is like a political group of military members that were obviously established themselves as a political group military system called the Hanoi. These obviously were the men who obviously created the Yuxing regime at the time, created a constitution that abolishes all of the aspects of human political freedom life, and basically they decided, well, this is not the time for us to obviously dissolve that. We're just going to keep it. And so these were the group of men called Hanoi, were actually with the military group men were actually going to be in charge for the next probably 7 to 10 years. And this is the direct result led to the election of Chun Doo-hwan's his presidency, and he won the election. So we're going to be talking about that as well. And this was actually a pivotal moment that existed in the political system throughout that 7 years. I honestly I'm not sure if I want to show this video, but this is an accurate portrait of what's the assassination of Park Chung-hee list. I'm not sure if any of you want me to show this video, but unfortunately, I'm not sure. How many of you want to see this, watch this video? If you could raise your hand if you want to. If not, then I'm going to move on. You want to raise your hand? You know, see how much. This is not an actual. This is not being taken from the broadcast or anyone, or it's not like a witness. This is from the Korean drama that depicts from that was going on at the time. So let's see. Can you hear it right now on this video? Yeah, so you'll start to see this. You see that guy was talking to Kim Jae-gyu there, the KCIA. Those are the presidential bodyguards that he shot. That's what I was talking about. So yeah, that was the action. That was just a depiction of what was going on at the assassination function. As you see, he started to shoot President Park first, and then he shot his presidential bodyguard, and so that eventually led to direct result of his assassination. So, whoops, how do I move this? Okay, all right. So after his assassination, so this was a time of instability, uncertainty, with a lot of uncertainty that was coming across the mind to what should we do after his death? And there's a lot of leadership. Okay, who's going to be the next in charge of the presidency? Korean Constitution, of course, it does mention saying that the acting president is the prime minister, which he shall become the acting president, and basically that was Che Guevara, which obviously he becomes the acting president for remainder of the President Park's presidency, and then ultimately becomes as the next president because the Constitution does say that he's the next. He does become the next president without the election, and so after this moment, this was actually called on December 12th, 1979 for the time. What this is basically means is that this is a group of military officers known as the Hanoi. They decided that they wanted to try to, which he was at the time considered as he was the Army Chief of Staff and Commander of Martial Law Forces, which he was trying to reorganize the military personnel administration. He said to himself in his argument that there is should be a political minded officers who should be held important offices in the government of the Blue House, even including the military positions, including the headquarters of Metropolitan Defense Division, the headquarters of Special Combat Division, and those who are enjoyed the special favor because of political minded. So basically, Chung Soo-hwan is basically saying we should not obviously let these people to be in charge of the political offices, no exceptions, obviously, because government posts are meant to be where the political officers should be in charge of presidential offices, important government officials. And so he decided that he should get rid of, there is no intention for them to be in the Blue House. And obviously, there has been a lot of tensions between Chung Soo-hwan and then Chung Do-hwan, which obviously there has been a lot of problems because Chung Soo-hwan's attitude that the military power should not intervene in political matters. It should not, and that's what his perspective was. But then Chung Do-hwan is saying that, well, there should be obviously interference where the military power should be in charge in political matters. So this is where it's gone wrong. This was the time when Chung Do-hwan, which then he was a major general, he decided to send a letter or the information to the Road Table, which he was the commander of the 9th Division at the time. He decided that this was an opportunity for us to go through this whole area, and then led to the coup d'etat movement. And so he arrested a lot of military officers, including the commander, Army Chief of Staff, Chung Soo-hwan, which he got arrested. And later on, he actually got he released from prison because Chung Do-hwan and his men actually fabricated the incident as a political charge-minded officer for him, but he wasn't. He was trying to prevent from military officers getting into governmental posts because of political matters. So that's what the focal point was. December 12th, 1979 is basically group of military officers decided to take in charge of the governmental post, and this was the beginning of that movement of another military dictatorship period for the next 7 to 10 years. And basically that's what it mentions about. These are the group of men who obviously got in charge to gather at the Gyeongbok Palace. You see Chung Do-hwan, which he was a commander of secret agency, and you see other military officers also led to the division. And if you kind of realize that a lot of these people were actually coming from the military academy, from where they graduated, and so all of these young, ambitious people, military officers who decided that even though they thought it was wrong thing to do to actually get into the governmental palace and taking control of the governmental orders, whatever it is, they thought that it was probably right for them, so that way it could lead to promotional or some type of political favors for them. And so you're starting to see a lot of these where young officers decided to go into the presidential office and decided to launch a coup d'etat. So, and let me skip it. This is more information about it, what was going on. And this is depicts the incident that was going on. And it's all written in kind of like a Korean, Chinese type of written at the time, but now these days they don't do that. It's all written in perfect format as December 12th, and these are the group of men who are responsible for that December 12th coup d'etat. So, and during this time, after 8 months of new military command and taking charge of the presidential offices, they decided to do what is known as the K operation. What this basically means is basically they decided to patch up the public opinion and decided to try to distort public basically about what the government is doing. So this led to huge amount of distortion within the public opinion, like they distorted the public opinions, what they thought of, why they didn't have the consent, or what the people think about this government. And so it's a military operation. They knew about it and they knew this was wrong, but unfortunately they decided to go ahead and decided that they want to carry out this operation. And so they decided to tell other offices, including Superintendent Joint Search Headquarters, that it was necessary for the CIA or KCIA to actually manipulate the public's opinions. So that was basically behind all of this. And so this was completely a disaster for many people in South Korea at the time. So basically it's like manipulating the press, as I mentioned. So this was the beginning of it. This Junjang training, which they call it a riot control training, this actually was a unit who actually specifically trained people, military people, personnel, specifically, trained for riot control, basically, specifically. So they held a huge amount of training and a huge amount of brutal training at the time that actually called to itself as Junjang riot control training, what they call it. So these are the people were the ones who actually got deployed to Gwangju to actually suppress against its own civilians and against its own citizens, even though they were wrongdoing, but they were actually trying to suppress against anti-government activities. And so these were the people who actually were big contributor to deployment to Gwangju at the time. So they actually also they were also the ones who obviously trained them for quelling demonstrators over stressing offense over defense. They also taught them how to use clubs like batons or their severity of the weapons that they obviously taught them how to do, even including bayonets. Bayonets is like, it's like having a weapon on you, but eventually they basically attach the knife to it. That's what the bayonet is. And basically that's where a lot of demonstrators have been killed by front of these soldiers because of that reason. So that's basically what was going on. This whole spring of 1980, this was the time, as I said, this is very much similar to other spring that was going on. You see the Prague Spring that was going on. It's basically even including Arab Spring that happened in 2011. And you also have other political spring that was going on, even in current modern day. They also basically, this was a time for them to say that we should restore all the political freedoms that we lost during the Park Chung-hee's administration that he severely suppressed against his own people. And so this actually led for probably a couple of months later down the road before that May 17 would officially been ended. And basically this consists of young people, young college students from all over the campuses decided to gather in this one huge area. I'm not sure which location they were in, but basically they just gather in this university, and then you're starting to see a lot of election of new student council at the point where they decided that this was a time for us to make a democracy movement. And so this was the period where this was the opportunity for them. And you obviously, I think around the May 17th, that's where this is in detail, so we're not going to go into further that. So Gwangju at the time, again, they did the same thing. They gathered the students within their campuses in the office, telling them to organize and let's do a political demonstration against the opportunity regime, including the Changwan's regime, saying that we would demand political freedom, and also carry out some campaign for school democratization, chanting them, demanding to the government, saying we need to have our political freedoms back to our own citizens. And so they create a lot of special committees within their own campuses. They started to see a lot of autonomy, which challenged the student offensive for conservative machine for controlling the students. There is an organization at the time which trying to control students' mind because of their pro-liberal stance. And literally, this was basically a bad thing to them, but it's really a turning point of what led to prior to the May 17 emergency martial law that was going on at the time. So, and obviously you're starting to see there were some solidarities among them in the Tiananmen University, and they're starting to change their minds on the police officers, because at the time, police officers, like what we see in the US right now, unfortunately, you're starting to see a lot of police officers are starting to get suppressed against his own citizens because of whatever the reason is. But at the time before this prior May 17th martial law that was going on, they were obviously just basically they just didn't suppress them. They just basically acting like a real law enforcement. They didn't obviously suppress anyone. They just did their job. Basically, they just were out there when the students were protesting, and basically they just trying to protect the students. They didn't like beating them up or anything. So, and basically they are starting to see some positive aspects towards the police officer at this time. Now we're going to go into the coup d'etat of May 17, 1980. This was another coup d'etat movement again, because there has been a lot of confusion that was going on. They decided that they want to have more total control of the government. So Zheng Duan actually, he and his men, including the new military group member, basically also the Hanaway, they call it, they decided that obviously they should take control of the government. Prior to it, in December 12th, they only took control of some governmental post offices at the time, but this was the beginning of total control of the government, basically a military government, you could call it, or authoritarian regime, or totalitarian. So basically, this May 17th, they held a meeting, a cabinet special committee meeting, and basically only lasted about probably 6 minutes. And basically, they're trying to vote to trying to pass this martial law on May 17th. What this martial law did is basically this is called the martial law decree of martial law decree of number 8, what they call it. And basically, what this says is basically you're not allowed to have political activities, ban political activities, curtail the freedom of the press, and basically shutting down the university. Now, I obviously, even in historians, even other experts, I am not sure why they decided to shut down a university. Maybe because it has to do with political student conferences they hold, or any type of political organization with the school. And I'm assuming that's my assumption why they decided to shut down these schools, because of that. But obviously, in reality, I mean, there's why obviously they should shut down the schools at all for whatever the reason is. I mean, students obviously just go to school every day, but why in the world would they just shut down the school for nothing? So basically, they shut down the universities, and they basically extend the martial law throughout the entire nation that did not apply to Jeju area. So prior to it, they extended the nation, but unfortunately they excluded the Jeju. But now they officially included Jeju as area where they started to extend the martial law. They also ordered the National Assembly, which is the governmental parliament. In other countries, they call it parliament. In the US, we call it Congress. They took control of that area, and they just successfully dispatched them into the troops, into the National Assembly, and they finally dissolved that. And basically what that means is basically the National Assembly is no under control from the civilian government. It's under the control of military government. So they are not allowed to vote. They're not allowed to vote in elections. Nothing, basically. Everything's controlled by the military government, basically under their command. And so that was the beginning of that May 1980. And so there has been a lot of problems at the time. And so we're going to go into the May 18th area. And this is basically a movement that they carried out to soldiers where they were at the time. This is a full detail. We're not going into detail of that. And so May 18th, Gwangju Democratization Movement, and this was the day of D-Day. This was the day of the moment where they decided to dispatch military troops down to the Gwangju area, and they started to send a lot of military troops, including basically paramilitary troopers. Paramilitary troopers, what it is basically like airborne soldiers, basically the one who obviously parachute themselves. Basically, those are specialized, highly division within the military forces. They also sent the special forces as well, which is really a deadly special military units that they highly specialized trained. So these are the specialized military forces unit that was trained at the time. And so this is the date and time that they sent the movements of military movements within Gwangju. And at the end of it, you're starting to see a lot of divisions of which weapons they have been used. Like you've seen starting to use revolver bullets, what type of weapons they've been using. This is the document. And then the next 10 days or so, this was basically a bloodiest moment of Gwangju area. They have been a lot of tensions, a lot of confrontation against military soldiers. This was basically a beginning of a fight against the military regime, basically. And so within 10 days, there has been a lot of clashes against the martial law forces, and you're starting to see a lot of schools starting to get closed down, not only in Gwangju, but all entire nation, as I was mentioning. And so students were left powerless. They had nothing to do about the martial law. They just, obviously, they were trying to think of themselves as why this martial law has been initiated and why obviously every single student have to follow that orders. Because they just don't have any freedoms now. This is basically, they just either have to quiet themselves, either they just stay at home and quiet themselves and not participate, or they're going to participate and sacrifice their lives to do this political demonstration. So that's been going on within the next 10 days from May 18th through May 28th. And so there has been a lot of clashes within the military government. And basically, we're not going to, I could get into little details about the next 10 days, but there's basically, all of it is what I was saying earlier, is basically a confrontation against military government. This document here, which I have taken from a source, May 18 Gwangju Democratization Uprising organization, these are the military troopers that have been sent. And again, this is coming from firearms to chemical arms. How many officers and privates were actually been demobilized and to send to Gwangju? And you also have a thing called the Tiananmen Street. This is a street where basically before the dawn of the day was going on, before the night, they obviously started to shut down public offices, industrial companies. More and more offices are, have been shut down. But because of that, they decided that more people have decided to demonstrate against the military government, and so that's what's going on. And there were no vehicles were allowed to pass on the Tiananmen Street at the time. They were not allowed to. Otherwise, you could kill yourself for the military officers. And so, hold on for a sec. But all of the next 10 days is all about basically confrontation within the government and also suppression against its own students. And there also, if you did not notice that, on May 21st, this was also another turning point. They actually went to the tax office and burned the crap. they obviously burned it, broke this furniture, and they decided to set fire to it because they were obviously mad about it, what the government is doing, and they decided that obviously this was the time to do that. And so they just burned up, I don't know, several governmental buildings because of outrageous frustrations among them because they do not like the government military regime and also the way they handle the martial law. And so that Kundan Street also, there has been some witnesses been saying that there has been street with flooded with bloods and all of the bloodstains were on the streets and many people have died. And so, yeah, obviously within the next 10 days or so, a lot of people have been killed. We're going to be talking about the death toll, obviously, because we're going to be talking about it in a few minutes. But then it's basically, as I said, it's the same thing. Military confrontation, more people are getting killed. This is the outline of the army movements within that suppression with the provincial hall, the 27th of May. This is basically a drawing where the military was moving from each city to each post to post office to shopping areas to any governmental buildings. They were trying to get close to the civilians so that way they could suppress them, attack them for that reason. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of thing. Now, oh no, I'm sorry about it. Don't know how to use this. Anyway, so this last slide or last thing about the Gwangju Democratization Movement is the position. It's the position what the United States involvement at the time. So what their position was. Now, during this time, U.S. obviously was under the control of the UN command at the time. So they were actually do have official bases in South Korea. They do have official base in South Korea. Even today, right now, they do because it's under the command of UN Army. So they have a Republic of Korea and U.S. combined forces there. And so if you want to declare martial law in South Korea, first of all, in the South Korean government, they don't have the ability to do that on their own. They don't. So there's a balance of power there that basically is saying that the president, who's the commander-in-chief, doesn't have the authorization of sending troops to suppress against his own people without the permission from the UN or obviously from the Department of Defense for the United States. So they have to get approval. And what they described is that Thomas Ross, which he was the spokesman at the time, he said that John A. Wilkman, who was the commander at the time, agreed to request of the Korean government who had asked for his permission to mobilize part of the Korean army in order to quell demonstrators. But he also stated that there was no movement of the North Korean army nor any evil that would take advantage of the internal disturbance of South Korea. This was taken from the correspondent of May 22nd at the time when they were having an interview. They also have issued a statement about the Gwangju situation at the time when the U.S. was hoped to have military troops at the time there. They said the U.S. Had deep apprehensions about the disturbance in Gwangju, which is a city located in the South Korea, and urged the parties concerned to explore ways toward a peaceful solution to self-control and conversation. In the case that unstable condition continue and the violence is aggravated, meaning if it's getting more serious, there may be a need for external force to be applied to the situation. And the U.S. government reemphasizes that we resolutely cope with any foreign attempts to take advantage of the present Korean situation in accordance with the obligation of the Republic of Korea U.S. Mutual Defense Agreement. So what it reminds me of this is that whether the U.S. got involved with this Gwangju, whether they knew about it, is still unquestioned, but it seems like they were aware of it. But they also do mention that obviously there was no involvement with the North Korean forces that actually got dispatched to Gwangju. Even including currently right now, there has been some controversial debate whether this May 18th was actually communist-inspired rebellion infiltrated from the North Korea, which is highly, obviously, distorted. There's a historical distortion there made from the conservative government, which also the military regime at the time was also conservative government, and so they still continuously distort this information about that the North Korean involvement has actually infiltrated the area, and that also led to contribution to what led to the martial law, because Chun Doo-hwan's regime at the time, they thought, okay, obviously there's a North Korean infiltrator, or according to intelligence sources, but they actually fabricated that evidence. They did. So that's basically unfortunate. And so that led to a decision to do a martial law, and that's the way they sent the troops. And they obviously called these Gwangju's democracy protesters as anti-Americans and also communist people, which obviously that is not true, basically. That's just a political fallacy that they just instituted from the conservative government. And literally Korea has a problem even till today right now, because that's basically just a political distortion trying to gain their political attention and their image from the conservative government. And that's why they have a bad track record on it, trying to distort the history. And basically, and even obviously also another commander-in-chief of the General Staff of the Army addressed a message asking them to cooperate to get involved with this Gwangju uprising, but even though there was no sign of invasion from North Korea at all, the U.S. government actually at the time prior to this continues to say if the Gwangju station got worse, the North Korean army might attack that area. And this have been influenced by isolating Gwangju Polopin and helped them to justify the armed suppression by producing an atmosphere of terror among the people. But it says, accordingly, there's no way to excuse the U.S. support of new military power directly after December 12th. So they knew that obviously this was not a good idea for the U.S. to get involved with it, but there still have been debates among today whether the U.S. Got involved directly or indirectly with the Gwangju uprising, which historians and experts right now are under investigation regarding to that. And I really hope that U.S. didn't got involved with this. But if the U.S. if the U.S. government did got involved with this is another tragedy for it. And there has been multiple times where the U.S. obviously go to other countries and decided they want to get rid of the leadership position because they hate that political leader because of the political position that they had, and so they keep going around other countries, and that's what you call a regime change, is trying to get rid of the bad people and install new people who is a good person, good political leader, but then ultimately that's not, it always turns out to be a bad situation even afterwards when they remove that bad political leader. And so that's basically the end of that slide for that. What was going on, the Gwangju Democratization Movement is simply a group of young people have sacrificed their lives just trying to protect democracy and political freedoms, even what South Korea enjoy today. And so literally, that was the whole fundamental of why this democracy movement happened in the first place in Gwangju. And the democracy movement is still happening even today right now, especially in Europe and other countries. You're starting to see Asia starting to have some democracy movement. You're also starting to see in Middle East, in Africa, a lot of these continents are experiencing some political difficulties within our own domestic countries, and they're trying to bring political freedom, trying to make a greater country, trying to secure economic freedom, and trying to incentivize that so that way the future generation can live better and also have their own political freedom for the future generation in the next generations to come in. So that's why the democracy movement happened in the first place, is trying to protect people's freedom and not let the government trample our own rights of freedom. And so that's why the democracy movement happens as of today. I obviously, we're actually over an hour. So we're obviously going to go into the conversation of why is it controversial. As I said, conservative government continuously continue to deny the allegations because of these efforts to shape the public memory of the May 18th democratic uprising, which is the continuously they contest it right now. Conservative government, they continuously have trying to censor the memory of this. They obviously also censor some of the events to commemorate this. And so you're starting to see some far-right organization, political commentators have literally says the Pyongyang, which is capital of North Korea, they said they sent the to support those southern riders, which is not true. Obviously, other people have filed a lawsuit against that one person because of what he said, because of fake news and what he claims on that. And so there has been an allegation of DPRK involvement in the uprising negated by the investigation from the Republic of Korea's Defense Ministry commission that's been held 2 years ago. And they said they denied this. There's no obviously involvement with North Korean dispatching that also are trying to challenge the evidence from the U.S. If you see it, according to CIA documents, declassified in 2004, North Korea did not take to be taking any military steps in response to the deteriorating political situation in the South in that early May of that year. So this was obviously the CIA maintained that regardless, there were no signs of anything untoward underway towards the North Korea. So there was no involvement from them. And so they kept been saying this for years. And obviously this has been said from the U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Donald Craig, who was an intelligence specialist in the time. So they're starting to see a lot of conservative groups, far-right groups, continuously discredit about this incident and this May 18th democratization movement. And this day, but obviously this is becoming problematic right now. And they also banned, there was a May 18th commemorating song called the March for the Blood. They also continuously censor that music because they're saying that was actually a position from North Korea from the basically patronizing the North Korean leader Kim Il-sung. And so that was not, basically that is untrue. That was not the case, obviously, but that was the real motive why they decided to censor that music. And they have been doing that for at least a decade, but last year they decided to do that. And so, but for the first time in last year, they decided to hold that music in the public and under the liberal government, under Moon Jae-in, and actually that continues on this day. They decided to open that publicly for the first time to sing that song, commemorating those people who had lost their lives in the May 18th democratization movement. So I'm obviously gonna stop here and basically let you guys have any questions or any similar experiences that it happens in your own country that gone through a democratization movement, either in the past or if it's going on right now. This is time for you to share your experiences. And you could obviously unmute your mic when you're ready to talk about it.
I have a question. Just maybe, well, you've mentioned it a little bit about the point when there were mass demonstrations starting. You said that the police basically continue doing their job, basically just protecting students. Were there any sort of orders from the government, that the government at the times, to sort of reinforce their ability to protect the current state of the government, or not to protect people or go against people? Because I think from my point of from my experience, this is a major landmark in the let's say mass uprisings, when the police is taking a side of the government, or in a good case scenario, takes a side of people.
As I said, that was the police protecting the students and civilians. This was prior to the May 18th, when the demonstration was going on, when the mass demonstration prior to that. But what you said, it also occurred when they decided to turn against their own citizen, where they suppressed them. They did. There has been a lot of cases where the police decided to suppress it against its own students. And obviously, there has been one person who was the police officer who was a trustworthy, like he's the guy who committed to basically tell the public the truth. Basically, he actually got arrested from the government because he didn't follow the orders of what the government is telling him to do, basically to suppress it against his own people at the Gwangju at the time. And because he didn't follow his orders, because of that simple, I don't know, political statement that they thrown onto him, decided to take him into jail and torture him. And he actually died because of that, under that state's orders that he did not follow with. But that did happen several times throughout the Korean history, even including during this time as well. And I just don't understand why the government's trying to force police officers to trying to say that you have the orders to follow because we don't like these people because they're anti-Americans or they're communists. And basically because what they're trying to do, what they have to follow those orders, they just have no choice to follow the orders, and that's what their mentality is. But that got satisfied because he decided he does not want to follow the orders from the government. And so that's just a tragedy for it. And I just hope that local government or government interference within civilian lives should not interfere in our daily lives. It has no business for it at all. And so that's my firm belief of why obviously police officers should not get politically charged for that incident. And so there has been a lot of cases of that, and I do agree with it, what you were saying earlier about whether they have to follow the orders or not. So.
From my side, first of all, thank you very much, James, for this presentation. So giving such a full picture of the events which were taking place. Thanks a lot for this. I have a question. It can go to both of you, in fact, just an open discussion. I'm interested to know, what do you think about when the state is strongly undemocratical? What kind of changes or some kind of events should happen that the society can start this democratic movement?
So let me rephrase, Hannah. So you're saying what kind of institutional changes needs to happen in order for the democracy movement to happen? Is that what you're saying, Hannah?
It doesn't have to be institutional changes. Just what can be this real booster for people to say that it's enough and it's time to change? It can be outside the country or inside the country. What do you think?
So I obviously would say that first, reconciliation building is the main priority. So that's what's going on in South Korea right now. They're trying to reinvestigate this 18 because they don't have right now, what we talked about is just only half of that, but they are trying to reinvestigate because there has been a lot of missing information that has not been told to the public right now, because some citizens or some survivors at the time, literally they were feared that if the citizens decided to talk about the real reality of what was going on, how brutal it was, the government actually had the ability to jail them. I mean, they have detention, they could torture them. And so they have no ability but to say to themselves, I'm going to be quiet for the first 20 or 40 years right now and say nothing until some pro-liberal or some new government that says, we had enough of this past atrocities, we had enough of basically a government abuse against its own people. And so they decided, let's do the truth-finding committee. And that's what the South Korea is trying to do right now, because there's some missing evidence of distortion that was going on. And they're trying to, conservative government, as I said, they're trying to revisionize its historical revision on the May 18th and trying to picture a different narrative. First thing to let the government to to get involved with any type of past atrocities or to get involved with the citizens is basically do the truth finding committee. That's what they're doing right now and trying to get a full picture of what was going on. And basically the quick question what the South Korean government do is who was responsible for the orders of May 18 democratization movement. Now I did say it was the former President Chung Do-hwan, but he's actually under trial because he's also responsible for shooting down against his own people from the helicopter because he told his soldiers to order that. Now, there's no further evidence, there's no true evidence, but they're trying to find out who it was. But they obviously believe that he was responsible for it. It's just right now they're in the court trial and they don't have the evidence, but what they could do. The government can step in and say that we're going to find this true evidence, we're going to find it, and we're going to obviously put him into trial and bring justice to who the perpetrator was. So that's what the first thing that the government can do. What the citizens can do is to send a petition to the government saying that we had enough of this past atrocities. We could send a saying that we want to investigate this past atrocities that was completely unanswered, that was not been told to the public or to the world, saying that we need to obviously investigate fully without political patronage or politicizing the historical reference to in that particular country or any country that you're from, and basically go on from there. And basically another thing is trying to hold like a, I don't know, peace event or reconciliation event or something like to that extent, to say that basically you're not the only one who's obviously you're participated. You'll also these survivors, hear their stories, get to know them, and basically takes down some notes. And basically, you could also tell to the government that in the writings that this is the person who we need to put it under the truth finding committee and be in the board, and obviously get involved with that. So those are the two things that you could actually get involved with: peace building, reconciliation, and also be in a truth finding committee to telling to the government that there's some past atrocities that happened. We need to investigate it thoroughly without political patronage or politicizing that historical relevance.
Well, I guess I'm from Belarus. Well, this is the country which is known for its being deeply undemocratic. And I guess that, so I guess it's hard to say what exactly the trigger that can serve for the uprising or this start for any kind of movement against the undemocratic regime. But I guess there is a certain tipping point in every society that just varies from country to country and region to region. When we talk about Eastern European countries and in particular the post-Soviet countries, I think the most dangerous point for the government, as they see it, is anything to do with the absence of economic economic opportunities. Basically, I can tell you that currently I reside in Moscow, as I've mentioned, and I can say that no matter how strongly the government would penetrate the human rights here, people sort of used to suffer in this regard, in certain sense, in our countries, because we had a history of repressions. We had a history of people being suppressed by the government, appointed as enemies. All of that part is sort of like in our genetics, I think, in our memory. So when the situations is happening, when someone happened the situation with the human rights violation in one of the regions or areas by the government or represented by the government, people sort of swallow this situation. It's something that we kind of used to, which sounds horrible, but it is a part of true. What I can see as a trigger for the moment is that the economic situation, which gives people no opportunity to survival. You know, when you take basically breath from them and the ability to go to work, and current situation with COVID-19 actually showed that we're very close to the age where the private business loses their places and the ability to perform, basically forming such negative attitude towards government and this readiness to go and start action and there is nothing to lose anymore sense. So I believe in our area in post-Soviet countries, this is something that we've been treated with, like sort of exchange of our human rights for these economic opportunities. But when you take the economic opportunities from people, they felt like, okay, you know, now we see that not only our rights are violated, but right now we're not able to support ourselves. And that's the tipping point that I think can lead to uprising, to revolutionary moods and different kind of societal changes.
Yeah, thank you very much to both of you for sharing. It's very, very insightful. I share a lot of your positions, Ada, because of course we are coming from the same environment and we face the same situation. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously. I obviously, think that this democratization movement or any political movement has been going on in the past roughly 10 or 20 years, even right now, even in COVID situation right now, you're starting to see a lot of governments around the world are trying to use this opportunity to clamp down, suppress against protesters or someone who is in the opposition who are going against the government's positions on COVID-19 policies. We're starting to see that in Hungary, where Viktor Orban, he actually, I would say he obviously passed a really stringent laws in the past century or something regarding to it, where he decided that it's time to shut down our economy, it's time to shut down the political activities, all of those literally where you just cannot move anywhere. You just cannot have any type of political freedom or social freedoms that you once enjoyed prior to this COVID-19. You're starting to see that in a lot of Europe. You're starting to see that in Asia, where I think Philippines government are now trying to institute a martial law, kind of similar to what I said earlier, similar to Gwangju May 18 movement, where they trying to pass martial law about ban political activities or a lot of those freedom of social and political freedoms that was going on. So basically this notion of this government trying to intervene in our daily lives is just completely outrageous. I mean, it is. Where they just like take control too much in our daily lives, and that is just like too much. We just need to balance it out where the government has the ability to take control in certain aspects, and also where they should not get too much involvement in our political aspect of freedom of lives. I mean, it's just we need to find a conclusion where the government can control and where the government cannot. I mean, if they step out of the boundaries, it just gotten too much, and that's the big problematic what we're experiencing right now, and so that's the problem.
Hi all. Sorry to interrupt, and I'm sure it is a fantastic session, and I'm interrupting for a very annoying reason. So obviously this is on our Zoom account, and now another member of our team has a Zoom call with 30 partners that is supposed to happen at the same time in 10 minutes. If I could just send you a Google Meets link and you just move it there, if you could do that, because you can share your screen on that anyway, and it's totally fine. But I've created a link. Is that okay if you guys just hop over to Google Meets if I send you the link?
So you want me to move us to the Google Meet right now?
Yeah, so I'll send you the link. I'll email you guys the link, and then you can present and do everything on there.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Incredibly bad form from us. I've just messaged you guys. And I'm sorry, because I have to go back to the meeting that I was in, which is why I couldn't join you, but I needed to do this. So I'll email this to you as well. And thank you for your understanding. Bye, guys. I'll
Okay,
email you as well.
Okay.
See you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to see each other in a different room right now, so I'm going to be heading there.
Bye.
Bye bye.